It was reported that Jennifer Lopez is now dating Alex Rodriguez. They've already been given the celebrity couple name A-Hole. Scientists are planning a new experiment on the International Space Station that will freeze atoms to 1/1000th of a degree above absolute zero, making it the coldest spot in the entire universe. Just a 1/10 of a degree colder than Brie Larson's reaction to Casey Affleck's Oscar win. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, that's right. Robert Palmer has a bad case of loving each and every one of you, just like those of us here on the Trump Report. Welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt on Twitter at ChristianDMZ, joined as always by Scott Moore at SMan80, and joined in the middle of the desk for those of you watching on YouTube, and for those of you listening, just imagine she is sitting at the center of the desk. Brooke, is it Solis or am I?
Brooke Solis.
All right, because I was just like, I felt like that was right, but having not asked you before we went on the air, like I should have, I was just like, let me not act like I know. And Brooks, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate. This is your maiden voyage here on the Trump Report.
Yes.
But the best part about being a first timer here on the Trump Report is we'll throw you right into something. You made me aware of news, some late breaking news. That Rachel Maddow was on MSNBC just a little while ago talking about, and this is the part that I don't like when people start to say, well, I've seen part of. She's seen part of a President Trump? He wasn't at the time.
Right.
Tax return from 2005, which there's some information that we've gotten since then. But tell us what you heard since you broke the story to me. I want to give you the scoop.
I was just sitting in traffic. Every story begins with that. In
That's
LA.
true, yes.
And I got a notification that she had a portion of his tax returns, and I was instantly so excited, only to have my balloon deflated because my mother, who's a huge Politico as well, texted me and said, I'm watching, it's not much. There's good news for you because I'm a business owner. He wrote off a ton of stuff, great deductions. You should take a look at it. That way you can write off all you need to write off as well. And that's about all I got. I think 150 million.
He made he made 108. So yeah, he made more than 150 million in 2005 and paid 38 million dollars in income taxes that year. Which, when you think of the percentage, you're like, oh, I don't know if that's a lot. However, it is $38 million. That's a lot of tax.
It's still like 25%.
Yeah, so I feel as though, in his tax bracket, but I don't know. It sounds all on the up and up. But the New York Times pointed out that he wrote off $100 million in business losses in that same year. So we don't know that much about that. But when you hear this news, Brooke, as, again, our special guest, and of course, ladies first, what is your reaction to hearing it? That we need to know more, or do you feel like there's...
I mean, I have felt that we needed to know more a long time ago. And I know most of you guys who are watching Trump Report don't really know me. I'll give a little bit of an intro. And I know that this panel, as I've seen, is fairly liberal, you'd say.
Well, Drexel's not here tonight, so it's a little bit less liberal. Yeah.
As am I, unfortunately, for some. More socially liberal, a little more fiscally conservative for me. I was raised in Texas, in the Bible Belt of Texas, so I have a lot of conservative friends. So I decided since I was coming on today, that I was going to bring my view and the opposing view and some of what my friends have to say about it. So I feel two kinds of ways.
Great.
Obviously, he should have been transparent with that a long time ago. Every other president has given up their tax returns, so we have an idea of their business dealings, whether or not they've been following the law, etc. At the same time, I don't know. I feel like this was just a little bit of a pull for Rachel Maddow or MSNBC to take this little portion of this 2005 tax return. I don't even know if that's lawful. Apparently, I forget who the guy was.
I guess it depends on how they got it.
I heard that a Nobel Prize winner received it in the mail. And there's from an anonymous source.
The old anonymous source.
Yeah.
And that's where we always get into, sort of very gray areas.
If it's a push for ratings, that's fine, but couldn't you give us a little more meat?
Well, here's the thing, if I had to guess, that they have part of it and they're afraid to wait until they have all of it because maybe somebody else either has or
Right.
could
Of
have
course,
the
of
part of
course.
it. And also, it's only Tuesday, so maybe they know how much more of it they have, and it's like, well, Wednesday we'll have a little bit more, and
yeah.
And they like
because-
to do the news on Friday, it seems, because every time I watch Rachel, she's like, Friday night, a lot of
Yeah.
big news happens. But kind of to take your point, Brooke, I do agree. I think it was a ratings publicity stunt, and I pretty much guessed that it was going to be like a 1040, that they didn't really have that much. And I think maybe it was also a way for them to see, perhaps they could get Trump to get a little frightened, and maybe he would release some more of his
Preemptively tweet
yes,
out.
and he kind of they kind of did. They wanted to get ahead of it, so they released what they could, the bare minimum. And I do think he needs to be more transparent. I think he's a unique situation with all of his entanglements and business dealings that it already makes people uncomfortable not knowing what things he has out in other parts of the world that he has an influence in or a vested interest in. And he claimed he didn't pay federal income taxes for years, so that's
Right.
interesting to see that he in fact did.
Right.
But there's definitely a lot more there, and I do agree with you. I think it would have been better to maybe see what else was out there before just doing a big tease and being, here's a 1040. And it's better than nothing, and it's keeping the conversation going, because I think Trump felt like, we just kind of give up on the tax return thing, like Russia. These stories are just going to keep happening.
I mean, he's just trying to wait us out.
Yeah, and
I
they're
think
just
that
not going to go away.
a lot of people have lost interest in probably a lot of it. This is sort of more of a broad topic, but it's also a local topic. There have been all the marches and the movements and the parades and things like that. Huge turnouts for all those. But here in Los Angeles, we just had an election last week, and the turnout was 11%.
Right.
So obviously, the president's not on the ballot, but if you're going to be angry and mobilized, we talked a little bit about this last week, you should probably, vote, And so I think that the apathy of the American people is, let me put it a different way. No one's going to go broke overestimating the apathy of the American people. There's a lot of other things to be interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, baseball season's about to start. I'm going to probably care a lot less about, all this, because I'll start doing the Mets Wrap 360s, and I'll have 2 shows, and, I'll probably spend a lot more time. No, I'm half joking.
Wait, so Mets
Yeah.
fan, is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yes, I'm from
Not
New
a
York.
Dodgers fan.
Not a Dodgers fan.
And
no,
not a
no.
Texas Rangers fan.
No.
But I will say, I mean, yes, I think the voting thing is horrible out here, because as we were trying to say, like, local really is everything. It starts
Yeah.
at local level. But, a lot of people are saying, oh, this means the Democratic Party's still not there. They're not going to be prepared. But I take a different tack, even though, again, I don't excuse the behavior. I think a lot of people out here don't vote because they already feel like it's a liberal city, and the people that are liberal already know. And that's the same issue that happened with the Hillary Clinton voters. People just thought, oh, she's going to win. So I'm not saying it's the right thing, but I think a lot of people sit out the local elections here in LA because they already feel like the things they want are going to be voted in anyways. So they feel less of a threat to get out and vote. And there was no real competition with half the people on the city council. There was nobody. They were running unopposed. And Eric Garcetti had token opposition. So I feel like it's not so much that, oh, the Democratic Party's not going to be out in full force in 18 and 20. I think it was more of this is a local election. It's going to go in the Liberals' favor, and then conservatives have no reason to vote because they know they don't have the votes to get what they want. It's still wrong, and people really should go out and vote no matter what, but
I mean,
I take it more
especially
as that kind of a reason why it wasn't as high.
especially these off-year elections. I think it took me like 60 seconds. If the
I know,
line
it
had
was
been
so
longer
easy.
and it had taken 5 minutes, I would have felt good about that too.
But they will no longer be off years anymore.
Yeah.
Now that's why the city has moved forward. So now the term limits are 5.5 years, so that can be matched with the gubernatorial and presidential years now.
See, I didn't even realize that. So
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
we're learning
Now,
thanks to
It will be
Yeah.
moved, so I think that will help with voter turnout. It's still really terrible, but
thanks to Scott Moore on Twitter at
the more
sman80.
you know.
Some good comments in the chat. Lady Goth 12. Lady Goth E, I don't even know how you pronounce it, but we've seen you before on Twitter. She says something very funny. Drexel is a liberal. And Shareable Texas.
Crazy, right?
This is in reference to the tax return being released. Shareable Texas, a fellow Texan, says it was not strategic. Trump is going to react and make legitimate claims against the media for making a big deal about 2 pages of compliance. I'm pretty liberal, but that was embarrassing. However, if it does lead to him giving the entire return, then mission accomplished.
Right.
But I understand the point. Running with it when you don't have all of it
is a little
but
it is silly.
You know, we were talking about it being a ratings play. If there's anything that MSNBC needs, it's ratings. You know,
and the White House has already responded.
Well, I have not seen what they said. Do you have that
have
in
it
front
right
of you,
here.
please? Brooke, giving us
Says,
late breaking
and
news.
I can just see Sean Spicer saying this. You know you're desperate for ratings when you're willing to violate the law to push a story about 2 pages of tax returns from over a decade ago. Before being elected, Mr. Trump was one of the most successful businessmen in the world with a responsibility to his company, his family, and his employees to pay no more tax than legally required. That being said, Mr. Trump paid $38 million even after taking into account large-scale depreciation for construction on an income of more than $150 million, as well as paying tens of millions of dollars in other taxes such as sales and excise taxes and employment taxes, and this illegally published return proves just that. I'm almost done. Despite this substantial income figure and tax paid, it is totally illegal to steal and publish tax returns. The dishonest media can continue to make this part of their agenda while the president will focus on his, which includes distractions. I mean, tax reform that will benefit all Americans. Speaking of tax reform.
Speaking of tax reform, no, and look, it's the response that one would expect to get from them, and I feel like we're going to hear a lot more about this if I had to
I'm
guess.
ready for his 3 a.m. tweets. to
If
come
I
out.
had to think more about this, we'll probably be talking about this next
Yes.
week as well. But by the way, that update from Brooke Solis at Brooke Solis TV, because I did not give out your Twitter handle before, and I did not want to be a rude host to our special guest. So the title of the episode that we're doing here of the Trump Report, Doctor, give me the fake news. I give a hat tip to Stephen Lemieux at Popcorn Talk, who suggested when he saw what the title was going to be, he's like, hey, use the next line of the song. But instead of give me the news, give me the fake news. And I was like, I can't argue with that.
That's right.
So that was fun. But the reason we have that title is because I'm like, oh, well, we got so much to say about Trump care. Obviously, we're going to start off talking about that. And as is so often the case with this show, something happened. In fact, we were talking, and I was like, oh, yeah, it seems like it's going to pretty much be the stuff I sent out this afternoon. I haven't heard about anything. And you're like, well, did you hear about Rachel Maddow? And I'm like, no, I did not. And that's how we ended up here. But let's talk a little bit about what they're not calling Trump care, but we'll call it Trump care. Yeah. You know, President Obama, they tried to use Obamacare as sort of an albatross hanging around his neck. He's like, no, I kind of like it, you know, and it's good. So if you're proud of it, put your name on it.
Yeah, Trump puts his name on everything else.
Everything else, yeah.
Convenient. Why he doesn't want to on this?
He's put his name on some very tacky buildings and some awful casinos in Atlantic City, but that's all right. But not on Trump care. So the Congressional Budget Office says that there's going to be a lot of problems with it. When you, Scott, hear about Trump care, and obviously I don't think that anyone that is here in the studio or watching has really read through much of what they're proposing, but just as you hear about the coverage of it, your thoughts on what's wrong with it and whether it will ultimately pass, and if not, why it won't.
Well, I think the problem is they're basically doing the same thing they accused the Democrats of doing with Obamacare 7 years ago. They're trying to cram this through so fast without really thinking about the repercussions. And like I've said to several people on Twitter too, it's sad that this health stuff has turned into a political thing to begin with, even back when we were dealing with this with Obamacare initially, and no Republicans had signed on to support it. And then all they kept talking about was repeal, repeal, repeal. And instead of actually working on fixing it and actually taking the credit for fixing the things that don't work, because we know Obamacare is not perfect, but instead they want to just rip the whole thing apart and start basically from scratch and use a lot of the pillars that Obamacare had, like the pre-existing conditions covered, being on your health insurance with your parents till you're 26, but then making it worse, of course. I mean, Paul Ryan was focusing on the fact that it would actually help the deficit, and great, so we're talking money, but what about when you're actually working with real people? And the funny thing is, the people it's going to help the most are a lot of people that are either liberal or Democratic, and the people that's going to hurt the most are going to be a lot of those Trump voters, which we've talked about for months, that are in the rural areas, the working class white voters that are going to be hurt by not getting the high enough tax credits like they got with Obamacare. And then the other big issue is this block grant. Instead of giving Medicaid towards, the states and Medicaid expansion, they want to just give X amount of money every year, block grants to the states, and let them figure out how they want to pay, for everybody per capita cap, but it's tapped into and tied into just cost of living increases, and we know that healthcare goes up a lot higher then cost of living increases. So now what happens to the rest of those people in those states now that are not going to be covered? Now are the states going to be paying for that? Like, where's that gap now going to fill in for the most vulnerable people? So there's a lot of issues there, and instead of it just being focused on money, like the Republicans seem to be doing, and conservatives aren't even for this. That's the thing too. You have conservatives that are not for this. You have the moderate Republicans that are not for this. So I don't really see this passing in its present form, and I think it's going to be really tough to get to the Senate and be passed in its current form. It might be able to pass the House, but it's not going to be able to pass the Senate.
Right. I mean, I think a
in
lot
its
of the
current form.
indications are that it is not going to pass the House. But
Right.
even if it does, the Senate, it's usually what happens with these things. They seem to take things a little bit more seriously over
Well, and
there.
it's a smaller group, and you have, the senators have to speak for their entire state,
Yeah.
where a representative in the House can speak for a tiny district that
right.
might
You
be...
can speak for a few counties.
Right, and they might be pro, your 90%, but then when you have to deal with the whole state, that makes it a little trickier, especially when a lot of these people are going to get for re-election next year. And I think the other reason why Trump doesn't want to attach his name is because if it fails and doesn't do well, then he can kind of not take the credit for it, and he can let Paul Ryan and those in Congress take the fall for it. So that's a nice little tactic for him not to embrace it fully.
In the chat room, Lady Goth again says that isn't the White House going to try to call it Ryan Care?
Right.
But here's the
I've heard
thing.
that. I've heard
Here's
that,
the thing.
yeah.
If it works, somebody's
Of
going to lose their
course.
job over it being called Ryan Care.
course, they're gonna
so
take
they're
the
like
credit
they're
so
going to
fast.
hold it back. Like,
Yeah.
well, we're just going to call it the American Health Care or American Health Act or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
American Healthcare.
American Health Care Act.
Well, I think there's some underlying sneaky things going on with them wanting to attach Ryan's name to it. And then recently, they're putting out the audio. I don't know if you heard of Ryan.
Oh, I did hear that,
Badly
yes.
about Trump. I
Yep.
mean, this guy. We won't even get into him in terms of how much of a backbone he does not have.
Who, Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think now they're trying to pin kind of all of their potential failings on Paul Ryan, and there are so many things wrong with this Trump Care, American Health Care Act. More so, you talked about how it's going to adversely affect those who are low income. But I mean, Medicare and Medicaid, Trump ran on a platform saying he's not going
Right.
to change. He's not going to take money away from those two things. And now what's happening is the Medicaid subsidies are going
Right.
away.
That's exactly what they're
essentially.
gonna do.
That's exactly what they're going to do. The tax cuts that are happening are for the wealthiest, the top 1%, and the like you said, the per capita Medicaid spending that's going to be allowed per state is actually, most people who are on Medicaid are obviously economically disadvantaged, but they actually cycle in and out of it. They're not actually, statistics show that people who end up on hard times and end up on Medicaid don't stay on Medicaid. They go off, they go on. And one of the mandates that they're putting through is that if you cycle out of it, then you are no longer qualified to have it, in which case the less people who are qualified to have it, the less money that each state is going to get federally. And so slowly that number is going to go down and go down. And so it's really just a huge redistribution of wealth.
Which is
unfortunately.
not something that Republicans tend to run on, is the concept of redistribution of
Right,
wealth.
no, of
but
course not.
at
And it doesn't solve the core problem, and sort of what you were saying too, when they take that part away from these people, what are they supposed to do? And the other thing is that, they were so up in arms against the mandate that Obamacare had, but it's basically continuous coverage is just a nicer way of saying, well, you don't have to have insurance, but if you
Right.
drop insurance for 2 months or so, then you could pay up to 30% more to get it back. So in a way, it's still keeping people tied to their insurance plans, but it's just calling it a friendlier name and not saying you're forced to do it. But in a way
Right.
you are, because now you're going to be stuck paying more. So
In the long run, we all hurt more, especially the wealthy, because there will be repercussion when you have all of these low-income families sick and not able to pay and having to go to county hospitals,
Right.
and then they don't. I don't see how they don't see it, but they'll end up paying anyhow.
Right. Back to Paul Ryan, who, as you mentioned, he's not the strongest guy, and maybe doesn't have the biggest backbone. I think we just have to look back to 2012, the vice presidential debate. I think a lot of people sitting there would have stopped and said to Joe Biden, if they didn't punch him in the face while he's sitting there smiling like the Joker, like,
Yeah.
are you okay? You're acting like a deranged person, just with the big smile and the shaking. It's like, we're trying to talk about something serious here. But instead, he just was like, I'm just going to try and talk through it. Now, Paul Ryan strikes me as the kind of guy that, you could walk up to him and tell him that the Packers suck. He's a Wisconsin guy. And he'll be like, sometimes they do, yeah.
Some
and-
people feel that way. That's
Yeah,
their opinion.
he's like, it's okay. The Bears are all right too. And you're just like, well, yeah, exactly. What does he believe in? But he did try to very sternly say that if we don't pass Ryan care, Trump care, whatever you want to call it, the system is going to collapse.
Right.
So I don't know that that's the case. I mean, sure, eventually I think a lot of these things need to have the right amount of money in them. A lot of the entitlement programs, sure, eventually will run out. And that's what that's kind of what Paul Ryan's supposed to be the wizard at. So if this isn't really working out, in a way where it seems like it's all going to add up, then this is the one that you're involved in. Why are you not making it work better? If it's not going to pass,
Exactly.
You're the Speaker of the House, and you're supposed to be the numbers guy.
Yeah.
What should he be doing to make it easier to get passed? And the problem is, I don't think that he has what it takes to sort of throw his weight around as Speaker of the House and get people to actually get behind it. Exactly.
Right. Well, and it's not even that. It's the fact that they really never had a plan. Their plan was, let's just be against Obamacare when Obama was president, and let's do the repeal process and know it's going to be vetoed by Obama. And then when they were not expecting Trump to win, so when he did, they're like, oh shit, now we've got to actually come up with something.
Yeah.
And now they've tried to rush this through so fast, they haven't even really thought it all out. And they feel like, oh, it won't really matter in a couple years anyways. It won't really be our problem. And, it's sort of the same thing with Obamacare. They didn't give it the nurturement and the attention that it needed. It's like a house. If you don't maintain the house, it's going to start falling apart. And that's sort of what's happening with Obamacare, because they were not very reluctant to actually work on making it work, that now it is having issues and having more issues it would have had than if everybody had worked together to actually make the Medicaid expansion work a little better in the states, and the Republican governors weren't so opposed to all the things that Obamacare had and tried to turn away federal money. And so of course it's going to have problems when you're not actually maintaining it in the way it was supposed to. And yes, there are bigger issues to it, but when you're not even trying to maintain it, it's going to have problems too.
With Obamacare, Nancy Pelosi was kind of derided for basically saying, well, we need to pass it so we can see what's in it. And at the same time, they're kind of doing the same thing. And to your point of, well, we're just running on the notion of this is not Obamacare. People hate Obamacare. I believe President Trump has called it a disaster. He never says Obamacare. He says the disaster known as Obamacare, a little trademark right next to it. And he always refers to it as a disaster, but you're basically you're positioning this as not Obamacare, considering that Donald Trump won against a campaign that positioned their candidate as not Trump, instead of really letting about, it's like, well, if we just be not Trump, we're going to win easily, so let's not worry about it, all of that. We don't need to campaign in Wisconsin. Let's talk about Wisconsin tonight. If you're in the House, let us know in the chat or tweet us at TrumpReportABTV. But the point being that, what do you have? And try not to bore us. Paul Ryan is not the guy to be in front of this if you want him to not bore you. He can explain it to somebody who's very charismatic on television. And, I don't know, maybe they got to bring like a Hollywood producer in there. I don't know what it is. If they want people to understand it, you have to explain it, but not in the way that Paul Ryan would explain it, where we would all be asleep right now.
Yeah, I think that the entire plan has been very short-sighted, because obviously Republicans or conservatives care more so about reducing the tax burden altogether, and that's part of the way that they're planning on doing it, through these Medicaid cuts, et cetera, and not mandating that people have to pay into health care. But they're not looking at their constituents, like you said, these low-income families who are predominantly, a lot of them in rural areas, and more so, another piece of the AHCA that I read into that really kind of touched me was that they are going to also get rid of the mandates for addiction and mental health actuarial values in insurance. So when you buy health insurance, these actuarial values are put in there to ensure that the insurers make sure that those things are covered.
Right.
And right now with the heroin epidemic or opioid epidemic, for example, where most of those people or constituents are predominantly white and low income, not all.
No, but a lot in
that
rural.
No, I was going to say, in rural areas,
that's
those
their
are tremendous
constituency,
problems.
And
sure.
now those people are being left out, because if health insurance providers aren't mandated to provide coverage for that, where does that leave them?
Right.
And it just the problems continue to pile on. So they've been very short-sighted. And all they care about, as much as they want to drain the swamp and not care about the establishment and the elite, they're looking after the 1%. I'm sorry, that's just the case. And even with healthcare.
Right, and you see that, and you see how it works out, that it's going to give the 1% the biggest tax cuts for that, and giving older, wealthier people bigger tax cuts, and disproportionately affecting those. And again, the other thing about the rural area too is that there's less hospitals and doctors' offices. There's less choice already there for those people. So already it's going to be harder for them for costs, where at least in an urban area you have more options and you have more doctors and hospitals and professionals, and you can kind of be more competitive with your prices. In a weird way, it actually, again, hurts the supporters more than it hurts the more of the Democratic or liberal or the coastal elites, or however you want to call it, with this healthcare plan as well, which is an odd little side effect that they haven't really thought of either.
And I know the CBO estimates that, I guess, in 2026, 24 million are going to be without insurance, and conservatives will say that's because it's not being mandated. So if you choose not to have insurance, of course you're not going to have insurance. And they also say that the CBO gives out wonky estimates. For example, way back when they were looking at Obamacare, they estimated that 20 million would be insured. It actually ended up being 10 million. That's one of their what they say is a reason to not trust the CBO. Of course, you know, these are statistics. How can you really predict this? You don't really know, although I think statistics don't lie.
They don't
of course,
lie.
you can skew.
But it all goes with this administration on how they always, if it's against what they think, then it's not really
Of
real.
course.
But if it's for what they think, then it's real. Like just the same thing with the jobs report that came out last week. You know, before then it was fake. Now it's great.
Exactly.
You know, it's that same
Whatever
kind
is
of thing.
convenient for them. But for those who choose not to get health insurance, it's generally the wealthy who don't need to have health insurance, because if they should get sick, then they have the money to be able to pay for it. And why pay into insurance when they may not get sick?
Right. Or the
and
young people that are healthy.
Most of America doesn't have that luxury.
Right, exactly. I think that a lot of people need health insurance because they're sick. They have family members who are sick. They're concerned that they might be sick. I mean, I do understand the concept for younger people, which I am not. You know, but for those watching and those here in this building who are on other AfterBuzz shows who are all much younger than me, not saying that you two aren't younger than me, but I'm just saying I feel very old when I walk the hallways. And, you know, I can understand. I mean, I remember I didn't have health insurance in my 20s because it was like, you know, it's just cheaper to pay out of pocket when I go occasionally. And but at the same time, you know, you don't know what's going to happen.
But
so I understand both sides of it. So
Right.
why you should have it, you know, because now as a parent, I understand, well, you should have your health insurance. But I remember being a kid and I was like, oh no, I'm not spending $700 a month on Cobra. I might be exaggerating, but
Not
by
far.
I was gonna say not by
No,
much though, because
no.
I remember what Cobra cost, and this
Yeah.
was in like 2000.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that with the money, with my unemployment check. Put it all towards Cobra.
It's something that you don't really get
Yeah,
anything out of
and
when you're young and you're in good
Right,
health, and you
so
feel like, oh, this is a waste where I can
the
use that
system-
$700 to buy.
The system is
Game-
predicated
video
on
games.
healthy people paying insurance. And when there was the penalty for Obamacare, it wasn't that high. You know, I actually know people who are older who
So do I.
should have had health insurance, but they were like, I can't afford it.
Yep.
So I'm going to spend, I don't know, is this $700 I have in my head? But
Yeah,
maybe that's
it was
because
a
that's what I said
percentage
for Cobra.
of.
Yeah, that's what it
like
was. It-
1, 2, 3%.
Yeah, so it wasn't that much money, and
No.
they're like, all right, so yeah, the system is built on a foundation that is not necessarily going to be there. So I don't know what the fix is. Paul Ryan should know the fix because he's had all these years of criticizing Obamacare.
Oh, yeah,
Great,
they've
let
had
us know what it
years to be
is.
able to come up with
And that's
something.
the problem. And I've seen a lot of conservatives posting, friends of mine, people that I follow on Twitter, they're furious. You had all this time to
Right.
say how terrible Obamacare is, and you don't have a good idea. You just have a replacement, you know?
But that's part of the issue, is the fact that they did have all this time, but they spent all that complaining and whining and not actually think about something. And then the other thing is Obamacare was based on a conservative healthcare principle. It came from Romney Care and the Heritage Foundations and what they were using in Massachusetts when Romney was governor. So that's part of the problem too, is that just because now a Democratic president took ownership of it, now they want nothing to do with it. And the fact of the matter is they don't really have a good replacement, and it is very complicated, and it's sad that they're trying to ram something through that's really not very good. I mean, I remember looking at it last week, like, this is the best that they can do.
Yeah.
I would have been very supportive if they actually came up with something that was
No,
a
because
decent
as
replacement.
we've said
As a
on this
liberal, I
show
would have been
several
very happy.
times, that we're very clear there are problems with Obamacare. If they
Yes.
had figured out how to fix those and whatever they feel like they need to do to put their own stamp on it, great. But they didn't address those
No.
problems. They didn't address any. So
Just like where you said, Brooke, they just redistributed it around, and it's not making
Exactly.
it better, and it's not solving the core
I think
problem.
it's only going to make things worse. But I do tip my hat off to those Republican congressmen and women who realize that this is a mess and that more time needs to be given to it, like Representative Isa in San Diego, I think Congressman Cotton as well, who has said, I will vote.
Right.
Isa, Isa, who said, I will vote no, and hopefully there are enough who will hold off. I mean, we all, at the end of the day, want something that's going to be beneficial for everyone, but I don't know how long it's going to take to get there.
No, I don't either. And we're going to move on to another topic. But before we do, I wanted to catch up on some of the things in the chat. Shareable Texas says, Christian's age confirmed. Doesn't look a day over 22. Thank you, sir. or madam, I suppose. But your picture is of a man, so I assume you're a man. If we had T-shirts, I'd give you one, but we don't have them. But Shareable Texas, you also posted something very disturbing. You're actually from California? What are you doing trying to be a fake Texan?
Brooke will
not stand for that.
True.
But he said, yeah. So I don't know. You're gonna have to explain yourself. But and then the conversation always seemed. And look, we appreciate everybody who joins us in the YouTube chat. If you're watching live right now, there's a little window there on the side. You can join in. Nahum Dyer is always talking about how much he hates money and money shouldn't exist. And when I look at money, I feel so disgusted at the fact that humanity are ruled by pieces of paper. Okay, so do you want it to be like little gold nuggets or something? I don't understand.
Don't rely on Bitcoin, honey.
Yeah, well,
that's a Ponzi scheme.
It's funny that you said that because that's what I said a couple weeks ago. I was like, well, clearly he's an investor in Bitcoin. And he's always talking about this. Look, you can hate money, but everything is pretty much driven by money. You know, when you have the ideal society that some people consider, say communism, money is basically what undid communism, because the people at the top were like, well, I obviously need money. I mean, nobody else needs money, but I need it. Right. So the amount of corruption in the Soviet Union is what did it in. So,
and in China right now. I mean, when you think about it, it's still happening big time right now in China.
Yeah. So look, we're glad you feel that way, but man, you beat that drum a lot. So I feel like I'd like to know. I would like to know more about it. So we're gonna Scott. We're gonna have our friend Storage Yard resident join us via Skype in a couple weeks. Not next week, but the week after. But we'll open the forum up to having some chats with some of the people that are in the chat. So we can definitely talk in the future. But what I do want to move to is something that we talked a lot about last week. In fact, it inspired the title of the episode. I always feel like somebody's watching me. The Wiretap. John McCain says that John McCain, who, by the way, Donald Trump is not an admirer of because he likes people who don't get caught. I just feel like it's important to remind. I feel as though it's important to just remind people where President Trump stands on some of these people. John McCain, who his father was a senator and could have gone home at any time and stayed there with everyone else who was being held. And, he's basically a beaten, broken man all of his life ever since because of what he endured there. But Trump has a point. He did get caught. Anyway, John McCain says that Trump needs to produce evidence of President Obama bugging Trump Tower or withdraw claims of wiretapping. Now, my understanding of the situation is that Trump will do neither of those things. What they might be doing is not talking about it anymore, at least the White House proper. The Department of Justice is like, we're going to need a little bit more time.
Yeah, I think they're edging their way away from that.
They would love to edge their way.
Put something out in quotes again, which means hashtag JK.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, where's some hashtag JK? That would be great. If he's like, wiretapping, hashtag JK, nobody would talk about it anymore.
I want to teach him some Twitter etiquette. Like, I'm going to come up with hashtags for him. Like, one for him would definitely be sorry, not sorry. Because
that's true.
Him.
Yeah.
Definitely hashtag JK. I think if he learned to use emoticons, emojis after some of these tweets, then we could get a better understanding. Like, if you're just kidding, give the funny.
Although I do have the feeling that he would try too hard and just start overusing. Start overusing YOLO. He'll just be like anything that somebody doesn't understand is just like YOLO.
And let's be honest, he has no sense of humor, and we've already seen that. He doesn't even want to go.
Which is funny because I used to think he had a pretty decent sense of humor. I mean, decades ago he used to be on
Rye sexism.
Well, no, he used to be on the Howard Stern show, and he was kind of an entertaining guest. And, those tapes that, of course, people were trying to get while he was running for president. And it turned out that, anything that he said on that show was nowhere near as bad as what he said to Billy Bush. And look at that. He still got elected. So, again, everybody was putting all their eggs in the not Trump basket. But the issue at hand, the wiretapping, Brooke, where do you think we're headed with this? That they're just going to try and have it go away?
Well, apparently...
do you think there's a chance that there's evidence that, like, the Breitbart story that he saw at, like, 2 a.m. or whenever he actually read it and then tweeted about it, do you think that there is a chance that it could actually have happened?
I think if you look hard enough, you can find evidence of anything.
Now, that's true.
That's a good answer.
That is a great answer. But
For sure.
let's say that there is not the evidence. What do you think that the Trump White House will do with this story?
I think they're just going to edge their way away
Yeah.
from it, as Trump has with anything, and then distract us with something else or move towards something else controversial so that we kind of forget about it. As long as Kellyanne Conway kind of learns not to, mention something ridiculous like microwaves becoming...
turning into cameras.
turning into cameras or something of that nature. But apparently
Hey, I don't know. Look, I unplugged my microwave after she said that because I was like, wait, my microwave knows what I eat. What else does it know?
The only people who think their microwaves are watching them are meth heads. I'm sorry, but this is true. It's
He's like, no comment.
No, yeah, I'm gonna take I'm gonna invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Exactly, but we know he's paranoid, and that's part of the
Well,
scary thing about Trump is that he is paranoid. And all I keep talking about are these parallels to Nixon, and I keep seeing that with Trump, and it's just these baseless accusations, and it makes me less likely to ever believe anything he says. I mean, we've already seen him blatantly lie before he was president, and then he continues to do this on certain topics. So how are we ever supposed to trust him and know what's really happening and what he's really thinking? Because he'll just say the craziest things, and it's now I can't believe him on anything. I really can't.
I mean, his credibility is just
it's
shot. And,
it's scary, and that's
the
supposed to be the
performance that his
president.
entire cabinet, his Sean Spicer, Kellyanne Conway, that they put on every single day for this man should be award winning. Like, those people deserve an Oscar. They're amazing at dodging
it's like anybody who's
questions.
ever seen a Cirque du Soleil performance, it's really impressive, but they've got nothing on really just Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah.
Just the feats that they
They're
accomplish,
in a league of
the
their own.
things that they're asked to do, and the straight faces that they keep.
I know. There's so much talent there. Can you imagine if it were actually
If it was
directed
used for
towards something
good.
productive?
Look,
There's truly...
And not for evil. If it was used for good.
even if it was being used for ideas that maybe no one in the studio agrees with, if it was being used constructively to, try and shape policy, instead of putting out fires that the president sets, things that aren't necessarily true. And I know it's dumb to go back to the tweets about the size of the crowd on the mall on Inauguration Day, but they insisted that a photo that showed less people actually showed more people. And it's like, all right, you started that way. That was
the
literally
first
day
one.
one. So that's what we've had since then. We didn't even have like a couple days.
Right.
We were here on Inauguration Day, Scott and I, and we were trying to be positive and like, let's see what happens. And, I think by the time we wrapped up the show, those tweets were happening. We're like, all right, well, I don't know, crazy stuff happening there.
Already, and the 3 to 5 million illegal voters, and the voters being bussed in from Massachusetts to vote in New Hampshire.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he's actually saying that this kind of stuff happened. And it's one thing if you're other people like a Sean Spicer, Kellyanne Conway, or someone saying that on your behalf. But for you as the president to be making such claims is so irresponsible.
With no evidence.
With no evidence to back it up is so irresponsible.
As we talk about the wiretap, by the way, our friend Storage Yard resident, I saw you in the chat earlier. I know that you are a resident Trump fan. Any conservatives in there, any Trump fans want to say in the chat, I'm interested to know what you think about this. Do you think that President Obama had a wiretap in Trump Tower? And Trump is, of course, implying his phones. And look, of course it's not impossible. Like I said last week, they were worried that he was talking to Russia. Maybe they knew something, And I don't know that it was. I'm just saying it's not impossible.
Well, look,
at this point, nothing's
But
impossible.
is it likely? No. Without going through the proper channels. And
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, to give another perspective, though, I will say that we know that our government in the past has illegally surveilled others. It's not
Big
impossible.
shout out to Edward Snowden right now. I know he's a fan. Thanks for watching.
It's not impossible, and that there's some probability, because even when you're going through a campaign, the opposite sides are going to watch each other. They're going to go and see. They're going to have people on the floor listening. So that's entirely possible. But like you said, to go as far as to get a judge to actually and to have reason to go and actually wiretap, his phones or whatnot is
unlike.
there has to be more.
Exactly, or just Obama himself. Like maybe, like you said, if the government's surveilling on private citizens, did it actually go all the way up to to President Obama to actually authorize that, or was it done at a lower level if that did actually occur? And that's the difference too, because he's claiming that the president himself, Obama, had this wiretap, which again, I think that's a little bit more unlikely.
Does he think that President Obama put on a fake mustache and like an AT&T, uniform, or repairman uniform, something for the phone company, and he went in and actually tapped his phone?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it sounds as credible as some of the other things we've
course.
heard. And we referenced Kellyanne Conway with the microwaves that turn into cameras. Is that something that people are worried about? Look, now the one that I get is, I'm looking at my laptop right now. There is a little camera right there.
Yes.
I totally get how people could, but your
that.
microwave, which costs $9,
I'm sure
by the way.
anything, nowadays there's like the FBI, they have anything that could be a camera. Like a pen could be a camera. You put a
Yeah, I
camera
have a
on
feeling
your
that there's
purse.
cameras all around us. I don't know.
here.
I mean,
I
there
keep
could
a
be.
camera in my contact lens at all times, just in case.
And you're always recording.
But
yeah,
I'm from Texas and I worry. So, any of that is possible. I just wish that Republicans would just stick to the stuff that really matters and somehow convince him that, hey, you know what? We've got this in our hands. Let's move forward and make some real progress here instead of worrying about, or not even worrying, making these ridiculous claims. Like, you can make some real positive changes. This is coming. I've come really far to even say I want Trump to make some positive changes for us, because before I was like, not my president.
Right.
But I'm at a point now where it's like, let's move on with it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the thing, really. I mean, we've had the conversation last week or the week before. I was saying to Chelsea, like, look, I get it. People are very upset. There's somebody in the chat that mentioned I'm using air quotes for those listening, the Russian hack of the election that caused Trump to win. And it's like, look, you can be concerned about that. Someone can keep looking into it, but you have to do something else. You have to just take the cards that you're dealt, which is the Trump's president. And I'm not saying just give up. If you really feel like that's something that's happening, someone will look into it, make sure that people are looking into it, but focus on doing something going forward. It's the same thing with Trump. Don't dwell on all these things. Like, we get it. You don't think Alec Baldwin is funny when he does this impression of you. And anybody who saw it this weekend, it wasn't that funny.
It wasn't funny.
It usually is. But that one was terrible.
That was a little too off the normal news kind of the day.
Yeah, well, you did yourself a favor by missing that. But, at the end of the day, it's just like, all right, well, you have this opportunity. You became president when, by some accounts, even he didn't expect him to become president. So he has this opportunity. He's surrounded himself by people who have lots of ideas. We'll let the people in the audience decide whether they're good ideas or bad ideas. But there's plenty of ideas. There's a lot of things to try and things that you can do. But so much of the time seems to be spent on these trivialities, these things that don't matter. And I think that a lot of people are to the point where, like Brooke's saying, that, yes, there was not my president, but, okay, he's still the president.
Right.
And what's he going to do? What are the things... Really, what are the things to run against him on? It's like, well, we're going to run against him on he's full of shit and he's sexist and we don't like him. Well, that's what happened last year. So let's maybe, let him do the things he's trying to do.
And if he wants to talk about little specific nuances in society that are occurring, why not make positive commentary and condemn people like the white nationalists or... who are we? I forget who we were going to talk about who made this ridiculous...
Steve King. Representative Steve King. Yeah, we might not actually have time for that, but we're referencing it, yeah.
Or speak out against anti-Semitism, or talk more about, the 1 month we had for Black History Month and the institutional racism that is prevalent in America. And if you want to, like I said, make comments that are really going to change the fabric of our society, not about Arnold Schwarzenegger's ratings,
right? And help to unite us and not divide, because he keeps talking about how we're all so divided, but he's not helping. Because I'm still not on the bandwagon of supporting him, because I think he is a big liar and he's dangerous. But you're right, he's a limited time to work with a one-party situation right now, and it is limited. And as much as I can't stand Mitch McConnell, he has actually been smart in the past by saying, we're only going to have the Senate and Republican control. It's very limited. The pendulum always swings back the other direction. Yeah. And
they could hold on to it in 2018, but it's still limited.
But still, and the fact of the matter is, it's still, after this year, they're going to be back in election mode again. And so they really have a short time to work together. And then after that, it's going to be back to a presidential election again. And so to have all three, sides of the government under one party does not happen very often, as we saw. It was a decade before it happened last time. So They shouldn't squander this time, and I also think they're realizing it's a lot harder when you do have one party rule, because now everyone has their own little factions and to get things accomplished as well. So there's also that side too.
Our friend Storage Yard Resident is in the chat, and he specifically points out, I've taken microwaves for scrap metal, but I've never found a camera inside of one. Also, Lady Goth has a suggestion. Trump wiretapped his own tower. I'd believe it. Well, maybe he's worried if people are talking about him. But anyway,
there you go. It's just as likely he did that than it is that Obama.
As our time starts to wind down, as it often does, there's a couple of things I did want to talk about. Look, we're talking a lot about President Trump. We're talking about the idea that people view he's not their president, but the fact of the matter is he is a president. And oddly enough, we're about to talk about Snoop Dogg, who has a video where he assassinates a clown who looks like President Trump. And I have, look, whether this is a president you like, or you can, recuse yourself from that and imagine it's about a president you did like. It's not really the sort of thing that you should be doing, is showing people assassinating the president. And while I am a big fan of a lot of the work that Snoop Dogg does in the community, I just think it's such a stupid thing to do. And I don't, I get it. People are angry, but there's a lot of ways to manifest your anger in a more constructive manner. I don't know. I find it to be stupid, and this must be the first time that Snoop Dogg has ever used bad judgment. Well, but Brooke, your thoughts on that?
It was a gun that said bang. We
knew
it was a toy gun. I will say this: conservatives, if it had been the other way around and we were all up in arms, they would be like, "Oh, sensitive snowflakes!
Right.
That we have the right to bear arms, and this is our Second Amendment right." Blah blah blah.
Well,
now
First Amendment right to freedom of speech.
You're using the First Amendment to showcase the Second Amendment, which everybody should enjoy the synergy.
Snowflakes, but now, of course, since this is this way, they're like, "That's just obscene, and you should never do that to the president." But I think obviously Snoop Dogg is. He's also trying to get ratings. We're talking about it.
Exactly.
That was the whole point.
And, I don't know the last time that Snoop Dogg had a song out. I remember the last time I heard of Snoop Dogg, his name's Snoop Lion. So I don't know when he went back to Snoop Dogg.
He had a show with Martha Stewart. He had a show with
exactly.
Stewart.
And I was just like, well, what happened to him?
What happened to the lion?
Where's the lion?
He's trying to get more street cred since Martha Stewart was the felon on the show.
Well, let me tell you, that definitely helped Martha Stewart. So I don't know. I mean, I find that to be the sort of thing that it's like, all right, it's stupid.
If the roles were reversed, let's say it was Obama and it was like Eminem shooting Obama, I think that there would be a lot more polarization on both sides.
Well, Eminem would, if that had happened, Eminem would not be a recording artist anymore. He wouldn't be able to tour because obviously,
I agree.
He was trying to, in this hypothetical, this is not something that happened. It's a black president, but also it's also a very liberal president. Hollywood loves that president. The music industry like that, so that would obviously be, so I think that a lot of industries like the one that surrounds us here in Hollywood is like, oh yeah, but it's Trump, and we don't like him, and we like Snoop Dogg. So I not a fan of that. But also another thing that happened was we had the White House intruder, somebody who hopped the fence, and this happens a lot over the years.
It does.
I remember during President Clinton's administration, planes were flying into the White House, and I'm just not quite sure. Little mini planes, like on the lawn, not.
Now that won't even happen because they'll shoot you down.
Yeah, now they'll shoot you down. Yeah, that was a much simpler time when little prop planes could fly close to the White House. But and again, here's the other thing. The idea is, look, your president is inside the White House, and again, maybe you don't like this president, but the idea that somebody can get. I mean, Trump was in the White House at the time, and no, he didn't get that close to getting in the building, but he was on the property, and he apparently, by all accounts, ran pretty far.
Yeah, I'm surprised he got that.
Well, somebody, during the Obama era, one of the Marines actually got into the East Rim, and Obama was out of town that particular time, but they actually got into the house. Yeah, so,
and they got in and they changed his DVR settings. He was very upset. Yeah.
And put on Fox News. But yeah, I mean, it does happen, and no, you don't want the president to be at risk, but it's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. You also can only do so much, and you have to give props to the Secret Service to be able to protect a president, especially in these very volatile times, very divided nation. For sure, I'm sure President Obama had so many threats on a regular basis, and the fact that they can keep the president safe is pretty amazing, because when you look back in history, it is, people used to walk in and visit the president like it was office hours. When James Garfield was assassinated.
The block of cheese, for anyone who watched The West Wing.
You would walk right into the White House and actually have office hours and meet from the
It
street.
was like your guidance counselor,
It's
the
just
president. Yeah.
it's so you see how far it's changed and how far it's gone, but it's pretty incredible that really since Ronald Reagan's time we haven't had a close call. So
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much to Brooke Solis for joining
Thanks
us
for having
at
me.
Brooke
Yeah,
Solis
thank you.
TV, SOLIZ TV. But I looked at your Twitter followers. You don't need my help, but
No.
we appreciate
We need her
you.
help. You
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you
Tweet
retweet
out.
some of us? No, but anyway, we appreciate you having on. We'll definitely have you back soon. It's been
Love
great.
you.
Thank you for
Scott
being
Moore
here.
at SMan80. I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. Don't forget the Trump Report at Trump Report ABTV. Follow us there. Comment and rate us on iTunes. That helps the show. Next week, we'll have a special guest, Bobby McNeely, who's running for city council in Wheaton, Illinois. He was interested in coming on, and I'm like, sure, we'll talk politics with somebody who's running for elected office. And thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to everybody who watched. We'll see you next time. Have a good night.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.